Back with you in Atlantic Filmmakers, Paul Kimball joining us on the program today. And Paul, just before the break, we were talking about a number of the different things that you've had as a part of your life, music being an important one, the last 10 years or so, film. What were some of the early projects, or what was maybe the first project that you worked in that was kind of like, all-encompassing in terms of, you were hands-on in so many facets of it, and it took some time, and when you finally saw the finished product, you were like, you know what, okay, I can make film.
There's never been one of those when you see the finished. I'm a hack. I'd produced a couple of things when my former partner Len McKeegan and I first started Red Star Films, and I thought, I can't direct because I have no training. I thought you had to go to film school and stuff like that. And it was Ralph Holt, who was the head of Telefilm Atlantic Canada at the time, who I'd known from my days at Film Nova Scotia. Sat me down once. They had money in a film called Stanton T. Friedman is Real, which I was producing and sort of writing, but we had hired a friend of mine, Evangelo Cusis, to direct. And over coffee, Ralph said, well, Paul, why aren't you directing this? Because I basically gave him the entire story right there. And I said, well, I can't direct. And I think I might have told this story in season 1. And if I did, I apologize. But it really is that formative moment in your career where he said to me, Paul, monkeys can direct. Now, they should be smart monkeys, but as long as they have good crew people, like a good camera guy, a good sound guy, that can help them along as they start, or even later in their career, then that's all you really need, because what directing is about is story. So, do you know the story? Can you tell the story? And he said, look, you've just told me the story. You should be directing this film. This is it's not your story, but it's your story about somebody you know. And so I talked to Evangelo about it. He graciously agreed to step aside, and that was the first film. And I did. Finley Muir was my camera guy, John Rosborough, my sound guy. I've used them pretty much ever since for at least documentaries. And there are shots in that film, I wasn't even there. We would shoot what I want to, and then Finley would say, look, can I have half an hour? I just want to play around with Stan and shoot some stuff. And I go, sure, I'll go set up the next interview. And when I saw the footage later, when we got back home, I went, wow, that's a great shot. And you realize filmmaking is not about shots. Those are important. But filmmaking is about story. Right. So I had the story, and I had good people underneath me who knew to get the kind of shots that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. I think of them now because it's like Paul McCartney, when he first started, he didn't know how a recording studio worked, but he hung around George Martin and Jeff Emmerich and the guys at the recording studio. He learned. He became a good producer. And so over 10 years, I've learned. I think I've become a reasonably good, I can use a camera. I know how to set up lighting. All those things. I've paid attention. But at the core, it's still story. So at the end of the day, that's what mattered then, that's what matters now. And that's what makes it fun.
From that process, when you knew the story so well, and as you said, you had basically told it and then took over the directing of it, once the product was finished and you did get to watch what would then be the screenable version of it, was there anything after the fact that you said, oh, I could have done that differently, or no, that's kind of the way I wanted it, but were there any kind of surprises that was like, I couldn't really get what was in my head on there, or what was your kind of thought process as it turned out? You know
me, Scott. I'm never going to get everything that's in my head on there. And I probably shouldn't, because then we get an NC-17 rating, which would be death for the commercial. Sure. Again, the music industry was very helpful. When I started, because most people knew me as either the guy who'd done the Salter Street thing or the civil servant at Film Nova Scotia, most of the filmmakers in town, I wasn't part of that clique. I wasn't part of that group because they viewed me as a lawyer, an accountant, some guy who pushes money. What they didn't know was, while they were all in high school or whatever, I was out shucked my law career and played in a rock band. So, the creative juices had always flowed. And you learn in the music industry, so screw you guys. So you learn in the music, pompous, you learn in the music industry, you record a song, you listen to it, you think it's great, and then a year later you listen to it and you go, ugh. I never want to listen to that again. I wish I'd done that different. I can't listen to the old. I find it very hard to listen to stuff we recorded 15 years ago. But if I play it for someone who's never heard it before, they like it.
Right.
So the same thing is true with film. And it's really weird, but if you show a film to somebody like the Friedman film, I've seen that thing probably hundreds of times, in the edit suite thousands of times. So I have trouble watching it. I just, But for people because our distributor just put it up online last year, so it's much more available now in the United States. It had never been available in the U.S. other than DVD. Okay. So now everybody can watch it. And I get emails and stuff, and they go, this is a fantastic, reviews. People, 10 years after the film was made, people now reviewing it in the U.S. going, this is a wonderful film, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, great, glad you like it. I stopped watching that in 2005. That was the last time I think I saw it. But there's always going to be, I mean, like Eternal Kiss, the feature film that we have in the festival here, there's got to be at least 50 things that I'd change. But there's nothing I'd change. You know, it's that kind of thing where I wouldn't go back and redo it, even though I can see 50 things that I think are wrong with it. It is what it is. At some point, that's the thing you learn in the music industry too. At some point, you just fish and cut bait. Boom, done. And don't worry about it too much.
Now, before we get too much into Eternal Kiss, because that is your most recent work, but Eternal Kiss was your first feature-length film.
It was the first feature-length film I ever finished.
You ever finished. But, you know, you'll often hear anybody that works in film, particularly from a directing standpoint, say how important it is to cut your teeth on the shorter-length films, or, you know, the 5-minute, the 7-minute, the 10-minute. How important was that process for you to have that opportunity to work on some shorter stuff, to maybe, as they say, cut your teeth and to kind of learn techniques, directing skills, whatever, before you were ready to actually go into that feature length?
The answer that I'm supposed to give is that it's tremendously important. It's like playing AAA baseball before you hit the major leagues and blah, blah, blah. The truth is, it depends on the person. But can you really, it's like short stories and novels. Do short stories train you to write novels? Well, they train you to write, but do they train you to write the longer form? Maybe, maybe not. They are two entirely different things. I think it's probably harder to tell a good story in 5 minutes in a short film or a short story than it is when you have 90 minutes or 100 minutes. So it helps in a sense. It certainly helped to understand crew and lighting and all that sort of stuff, and to have constantly been working. I think that's the one thing that I had that a lot of my colleagues didn't have. While they were spending years and years in development with telefilm or something to get that script just right, I was actually out making stuff year after year. Television series here, a documentary here, another doc there, executive producing some guy's short film there. I was working, because at the end of the day, I think that's how you gain experience, that's how you become a better filmmaker, is by doing, not by constantly going through script revision 28 and then 29, but by getting out there and doing it. And then I got a lucky shot with Eternal Kiss. It kind of, that's a very long story, but the way, if I hadn't been doing those UFO docs, I never would have met the people in LA that eventually gave me the shot to do the feature film. So, you know, when you're working, you also tend to meet people and work with people and network, and it helps you meet those people that can help you down the road. So, yeah, you know, if you want to go down the short film route, fantastic. I think one of the biggest mistakes Film Nova Scotia ever made, I love them, but when I was there, they had a program called the Special Project Grant, which every year you give a few filmmakers $6,000, they'd raise a little more money, and they'd go out and make a short film. Tom Fitzgerald made his, I think it was his first film called Cherries, I think it was Cherries, before he ever made The Hanging Garden, through that program. Tremendously important program that they canceled after I left. And I never, you know, you have to decide where the money's going to go, but I thought that was a mistake. I still think it's a mistake. I think you should be putting money, even though I just said some people maybe don't need to go that route, I wish I had. You need to be putting money into short films and into training the next generation, into getting the Steven Strasbergs and A-ball ready to play in the major leagues. And I think that's maybe the one thing that's missing, which is not a criticism of Film Nova Scotia. Right. You know, money's short. So you have Bird in Hand, here's a feature film, short film. It's trying to balance. They do a great job, but that's the one thing, if anybody ever asks me what we need more of, it's more money to development. And not just script development, which is really money in a producer's pocket, but money into actually making short films that you can then take to festivals and people can get seen and have their work seen. I think that's important.
Now we're going to talk about some of your work with the paranormal UFO documentary, and of course we'll talk about Eternal Kiss, and we'll do all that right after this.